There is a reason why when human beings are just completely overwhelmed, when our brains feel like a tangled mess of open browser tabs, we instinctively retreat to the edges of lakes and oceans.
Oh, absolutely. We just stand there
Hmm.
staring at the water.
Right, waiting for something in our chest to finally resolve. And we use the word grace to describe what we're looking for in those moments.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, we use that same word to describe everything from like ballet dancers to really sincere apologies, but our cultural understanding of what grace actually means is, well, it's fundamentally broken.
It really is. We've gotten it completely backward.
So today, for this deep dive, we are exploring some fascinating evolutionary, ecological, and psychological research that completely deconstructs that misunderstanding. We're going to prove that true grace is actually a highly engineered, sometimes ferocious superpower.
Yeah. And to do that, it requires a complete paradigm shift.
Yeah.
To actually understand the swan, and by extension, the biological reality of grace,
Hmm.
we have to unlearn the myth that grace equals
Or
softness.
passivity, right?
Exactly. Or yielding. We tend to confuse grace with the absence of force. But evolutionary biology shows us that true grace is actually force that knows the self so intimately, it doesn't need to be crude about how it moves.
Yeah, I want to focus on that word force because that completely contradicts the whole feminine principle we usually associate with grace.
Yeah, the idea of just being polite and not making a scene.
Right. But if you look at a swan in full display, the posture that naturalists call musking, where the neck is arched back and the wings are raised like a massive white sail, that is not a soft display.
Not at all. It looks beautiful to us, sure, but it's actually a rigid, highly aggressive declaration of sovereign boundaries.
So they're basically saying, I own this space, back off.
Precisely. When a swan is busking, it is maximizing its visual footprint. And I mean, they back it up. Swans are notorious for their sheer physical power.
Oh, yeah. I read that a male mute swan, a cob defending a nest, will absolutely drive off foxes and dogs.
And humans, too. There are documented cases of swans literally breaking human bones with blunt force trauma from their wings.
Wait, really? Breaking bones?
Yeah. The wrist joint of a swan's wing is incredibly dense, and they strike with terrifying speed.
Wow. So the grace we are admiring actually includes the capacity for absolute ferocity. It's not graceful because it's harmless.
Exactly. The ferocity isn't a contradiction of its grace, It's the engine of it.
Hmm.
Grace is power that has integrated itself so completely that extreme efficiency just becomes its natural expression.
That makes so much sense because when a swan crosses the water, it isn't wasting a single micro movement. Everything is just exact.
And what we miss, like what's invisible to anyone casually watching from the bank, is the constant, highly calculated work of the feet beneath the surface.
Oh, right, paddling away down there.
Yeah, those large webbed feet are acting as rudders and paddles, constantly adjusting for the current, the depth, the specific drag of the water, all while the upper body remains entirely, perfectly still.
It's kind of like watching a master illusionist or a professional athlete effortlessly land a backflip. We watch it and call it grace, but what we're actually witnessing is a lifetime of hyper-refined effort that just no longer announces itself.
That's a great way to put it. The effort is still there, it's just entirely internalized. And that internalized effort is coordinated by an intelligence handling thousands of physical variables at once.
Right, which brings up the actual physical blueprint of the bird, because that capacity for invisible effort isn't just a happy accident, is it?
Oh, definitely not. We are talking about tens of millions of years of evolutionary selection pressure. Nature is constantly editing out inefficiency.
I was looking at the mechanics of the swan's neck, and it completely reframed my understanding of animal beauty. Like, we look at that long, elegant curve and see a question mark made of light.
Yeah, we romanticize it.
Exactly. But biologically, that neck is a strictly functional foraging tool, isn't it?
It is. Form and function are entirely fused here. A swan is what we call a dabbling bird, not a deep water diver. It feeds in shallow rivers and lakes by tipping forward to reach submerged aquatic vegetation.
Ah, so the neck has to be a specific length.
Right, it evolved for a highly specific mathematical reason. It needs to be exactly long enough to reach the nutrient-dense roots at the bottom of the riverbed, while the bird's buoyant body remains floating in the surface.
So if the neck is too short, the bird starves.
Yep. And if it's too heavy, the bird sinks, or it spends way too much caloric energy just keeping its head up. The curve we find so aesthetically pleasing is literally a masterclass in weight distribution and counterbalance.
If form and function are the exact same thing in the swan, does that mean what human beings perceive as beauty in the wild is really just our brains subconsciously recognizing peak efficiency?
Oh, biologists and neuroscientists would largely agree with that, yeah. True biological beauty is basically the visible footprint of a solved problem.
A solved problem. I love that.
Yeah, and just look at the mechanics of their flight. I mean, a mute swan can weigh over 30 pounds. Getting a 30-pound object airborne requires an astonishing manipulation of physics.
Right, they need that running start across the water.
They do. But once they are in the air, their wingspan, which can reach well over 2 meters, is just an absolute marvel of aerodynamics.
Actually, I read that modern aerospace engineers study the specific curvature of swan feathers to solve problems in large body aviation. Like, what exactly are they looking at?
Well, they're looking at how the swan manages drag. At the tip of the swan's wings, the primary flight feathers separate, almost like splayed fingers.
Okay.
So in aerodynamics, when air moves over a wing, it creates high pressure underneath and low pressure on top. At the wingtip, that high pressure air tries to roll over to the low pressure side.
Which creates those drag-inducing vortices, right? Like tiny
Yeah.
tornadoes holding the bird back.
Exactly, yeah. So by splaying those primary feathers, the swan breaks out one massive energy-draining vortex into several smaller, manageable ones.
Oh, wow. That's the exact same principle as the winglets you see on modern commercial jets, like those little upturned tips on an Airbus.
It's exactly the same. Human aviation is just barely beginning to approximate what nature solved through millions of years of rigorous editing. I mean, the swan's wing manages the air with such absolute precision that a 30-pound bird can migrate thousands of miles.
That's incredible, and yet culturally, we have completely watered down that reality.
Oh, entirely.
Like Western ballet, romantic poetry, fairy tales, they essentially hijacked the swan's image. They captured maybe 20% of its reality and turned it into this symbol of purely passive, fragile beauty.
Just a delicate things floating around waiting to be looked at.
Right, which is such an incredible disservice to the animal. Because real swans are highly assertive and territorially sovereign.
Yes, and this brings up a really crucial distinction in behavioral ecology that we deeply misunderstand, the difference between dominance and sovereignty.
Because humans are absolutely obsessed with dominance, aren't we? We view the animal kingdom entirely through the lens of alpha dynamics, like who is defeating whom.
We do, but dominance is actually a very costly, fragile state. To be dominant, you require constant enforcement.
Like you have to keep proving it.
Exactly. It requires coercion and external compliance. If you're the dominant wolf or, the dominant executive in a boardroom, you have to constantly expend energy maintaining that hierarchy. If you relax your force, you lose your position.
But sovereignty is different.
Very different. Sovereignty is the condition of being completely coherent in your own nature without internal conflict.
So it's like dominance is the loud, insecure boss who has to constantly remind the room they're in charge.
Yeah.
While sovereignty is the quiet expert in the corner who everyone naturally makes space for without a single word being spoken. The quiet expert isn't forcing anyone to yield, they just fully inhabit their own competence.
That is a perfect analogy. A sovereign being doesn't need to defeat others to know what it is. I mean, a swan doesn't need a heron to yield in order to know it's a swan.
Right, it just moves according to its own unhurried intelligence.
Exactly, and the rest of the ecosystem simply adjusts around it. When a mother swan defends her cygnets, she's embodying sovereignty. She doesn't panic at shadows and waste energy, but she doesn't underestimate genuine danger either.
She just reads threats accurately and responds with full physical capability.
Right, which fundamentally challenges our whole anthropomorphized version of Mother Nature as just a gentle, endlessly giving provider. Real nature creates, destroys, protects, and transforms.
And that sovereign presence doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It actually
Right.
dictates how they form relationships, right? Like anchoring the health of the entire water system they inhabit.
Yes, absolutely.
We've all heard the trope that swans mate for life. We put them on wedding invitations with their necks forming a little heart. But taking the Disney romance out of it, what is the actual biological strategy behind that fidelity?
It's a highly sophisticated adaptive strategy based on distributed intelligence and shared labor. Raising cygnets is incredibly calorically expensive and dangerous.
So it's about efficiency again.
Exactly. By maintaining a long-term pair bond, swans don't have to expend energy courting a new mate every season. And more importantly, a pair that has been together for years moves as a coordinated unit.
Like a team.
Yeah, they have a sustained behavioral investment in building a working intelligence distributed across two bodies. While one feeds, the other watches for predators. They share the incubation of the eggs.
So we love to project our own romantic fairy tales onto swans, but isn't it actually far more profound to view their fidelity as a deeply calculated biological choice to build a shared intelligence?
I think so. It guarantees a higher survival rate for their genetics. And the depth of that bond is rooted in observable behavioral reality, too.
Because of how they grieve, right. I was reading about that.
Yeah. When a mate dies, the surviving swan experiences visible, prolonged grief. They stop eating. They spend extended periods in the location where the mate died, just searching and vocalizing.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. The bond was a structural reality for them, and the loss of that shared intelligence is processed as a massive biological shock.
And their presence acts as a barometer for the lake itself, too. The swan isn't just a resident of a pond, it's a living instrument of ecological measurement.
Think of how we look at a coral reef. A bleaching reef is an unmistakable, visible signal of a systemic, invisible disruption, like ocean acidification or temperature spikes.
Or like an old-growth forest visually proving centuries of undisturbed ecological time.
Exactly. The swan operates the same way. The still water of a lake is an extraordinarily complex web of interdependence. You've got pH levels, macroinvertebrates, submerged vegetation, oxygenation.
Right, because if the water quality drops, the aquatic plants die off. And
Yeah,
if the plants die off, the swan has no food and leaves.
precisely. And furthermore, swans are ecosystem engineers. When they forage, they pull up roots and stir up the lake bed. This releases trapped nutrients back into the water column, which feeds smaller fish and insects.
So where swans successfully breed and return year after year, it means the entire invisible system, the watershed, the vegetation, everything is thriving.
Yep, the swan is the visible apex that proves the invisible ecological integrity of the water.
You know, because their physical and ecological presence is so undeniable, it led to something that I find completely fascinating. Human cultures across the globe, cultures that had absolutely no contact with each other independently, came to the exact same mythological conclusions about what the bird represents.
It's an incredible testament to how consistently the swan projects its nature. Like in Hindu tradition, you have the swan, or the swan goose, which is the vehicle of Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom and creative intelligence.
Right.
Classic texts describe the hamsa as having the capacity to separate milk from water.
Which is a metaphor for discernment, right? The ability to drink the milk, the truth, and leave the water, the illusion behind.
Yes, it represents the profound intelligence required to separate the essential from the temporary in a world where they're confusingly mixed together.
That's beautiful. And then in the Celtic tradition, swans are seen as liminal beings. They move seamlessly between the sky, the surface of the water, and the depths.
Yeah, and because they master all three elements, the Celts viewed them as creatures that could cross the permeable threshold between the human world and the other world. They often appeared in myths linked by golden chains.
And in ancient Greece, the swan was sacred to Apollo, the god of light, music, and prophecy, which actually brings up this whole other concept. Why do you think humanity universally decided that the swan song, the ultimate, most beautiful expression of truth, only comes at the threshold of letting go?
Well, while the idea that swans are silent is biologically inaccurate, I mean, they hiss, grunt, and have various calls, the myth survived for millennia because it names a profound psychological truth about the human voice. Most of us spend our entire lives modulating our voices. We edit what we say for safety, for social legibility, and for the management of consequence.
But isn't there an evolutionary advantage to that modulation? I mean, we live in complex societies. If I just say exactly what I think to my boss or my partner without managing the consequence, my life kind of falls apart. We hold back to survive.
Oh, we absolutely do. But the unmodulated voice, the voice that says exactly what it carries without editing for how it will be received, is a state of ultimate freedom.
And that's what the swan song points to.
Exactly. It's the voice that finally emerges when there is nothing left to protect. At the threshold of death, the management of consequence simply drops away. The fully expressed voice is more beautiful than the carefully managed one because it's finally free from fear.
Nature operates like this constantly, doesn't it? An earthquake doesn't soften itself because a city is in the way.
Right. A winter storm doesn't moderate its temperature to be polite. Nature speaks fully, without apology.
So psychologically, the lake represents the deep unconscious. And the swan teaches us how to be present on the surface of our inner lives without thrashing or agitating the water unnecessarily.
Yes, the silence around the swan makes its occasional sounds highly legible. If everything you do is noise, nothing is a signal.
But there is a massive caveat to all of this. That ultimate expression of beauty, that perfected grace, is not a permanent state.
No, it's not.
In fact, expecting it to be permanent is exactly where human culture goes wrong. We completely ignore the reality of the signet, and we ignore the biology of the molt.
We really do. We expect instant grace from ourselves and others, but the cygnet, the baby swan, is gray, brown, and ungainly. It looks nothing like the stark white sovereign it will become.
Right, grace is an arrival. It's grown through developmental time.
You cannot skip the gray period. Expecting instant wisdom or perfection from someone who is metaphorically or literally still growing their feathers is just an act of cruelty.
And even when you finally arrive at that peak state of grace, you don't get to stay there forever
Hmm.
because of the molt.
The molt is fascinating.
It is. Most birds molt sequentially. They lose a few flight feathers at a time so they can keep flying. But swans go through a catastrophic synchronous molt. They lose all their flight feathers at once.
Yeah, they are completely grounded, vulnerable, and stuck on the water for up to 6 weeks.
I want to look at this through the lens of modern hustle culture because we are absolutely terrified of our own molt periods. Times when we feel grounded, vulnerable, or like we've lost our edge. We think something is deeply wrong with us.
We view grounding as a failure. But for the swan, it's an absolute biological necessity. The creature most associated with effortless elevation must intentionally release its capacity for flight every single year.
Because you cannot grow new feathers while you are still in the air, the energetic cost is just too high.
Exactly. Feathers degrade. They take damage from the sun, the wind, the water. If a swan doesn't drop those compromised feathers, its wing structure will eventually fail mid-flight.
So you have to land. The old must be completely released for the new to emerge. The swan proves that true grace requires giving yourself permission to fall completely out of the sky so you can grow capacity for your next flight.
Grace isn't a permanent altitude. It's a cycle. The truly graceful being is the one who knows how to inhabit the molt season. They trust the safety of the water to hold them while they can't hold themselves in the air.
They don't fight the vulnerability.
Right, they submit to it.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've deconstructed this concept of grace. We've seen it as the hyper-refined ferocity of the busking posture, the sovereignty of the quiet expert, the shared intelligence of the pair bond, and the unmodulated voice.
And the biological necessity of falling out of the sky to rebuild your wings.
Exactly. The underlying question here is, how are you navigating your own medium? In your work, in your relationships, are you fighting the water? Or are you deeply understanding the invisible mechanics of your environment so you can carve through it effortlessly?
Are you allowing yourself the grace of the awkward cygnet phase?
Right. And when you are exhausted, are you permitting yourself a grounded molt period without judging yourself as a failure?
It all comes back to their relationship with the water.
Hmm.
Water behaves according to the deepest logic. It yields to pressure, it takes the shape of whatever contains it, but given enough time, it carves solid rock into a canyon. The swan doesn't battle the water. Its entire physical architecture is a continuous conversation with it.
And evolutionary biology tells us that over millions of years, the swan was physically shaped by its intimate relationship with that water. The medium literally shaped the creature's bones. So if the swan is a perfectly engineered physical reflection of the water it has inhabited for epochs,
Yeah.
what invisible medium, what cultural or digital water is currently shaping your mind, your habits, and your form without you even realizing it?